Judgment. The Sol system was silent to the galaxy, walled off by shimmering barriers of folded space. To the humans within, life continued as it always had. Wars, peace, disasters, and miracles woven into the story of their species. To the Galactic Council, they were a threat waiting to be unleashed. For millennia, the Council had judged rising civilizations, placing them on paths of guidance or destruction. None had disturbed them like the humans. They built weapons with one hand and saved strangers with the other. To the Council, that duality was dangerous, proof of instability. The eldest of the Council argued for eradication. Others voted instead for isolation, sealing Earth's arm of the galaxy under quarantine. But not all agreed. The Orwani's defiance, the chamber of the Galactic Council, was older than memory itself, carved into the bones of a hollowed-out moon that drifted at the edge of a blue giant star. Light refracted through crystalline walls, painting the gathered delegates in colors meant to inspire reverence. Instead, the shadows stretched long, like talons waiting to strike. The Orwani stood at the center. Tall, angular beings, their semi-translucent skin caught the light, casting prismatic halos across the floor. Their voices carried not only through air but through vibration, every word sung like a chorus of chimes. "You speak of order," the Orwani high voice declared, tones cascading like glass bells in the wind. "But what you preserve is stagnation. When the weak call for aid, it is not weakness to answer, it is strength. It is our duty." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some delegates nodded faintly, most turned away. At the elevated dais, the eldest of the council, beings whose lifespans were measured in millennia, exchanged knowing looks. Their eyes, black and depthless, held no sympathy. One of them, Erithar of the Krill Dominion, rose. His carapace gleamed as his mandibles clicked, voice cold and measured. "You dress conquest in the garb of mercy. We see through your facade. The rescued worlds you claim to save, evidence shows they now labor under your rule." The Orwani delegation erupted in protests, their resonant voices clashing like breaking glass. The high voice raised a hand, silencing them. Fabrications, lies whispered by those afraid of being reminded of what compassion looks like. A silence followed, heavier than any roar. Another elder spoke, her body like living smoke. 3 centuries we have tolerated your dissent. 3 centuries you have disrupted order with reckless aid. Enough. The council rules. Either submit to oversight or face judgment. The Orwani high voice tilted their crystalline head. The refracted light across their body flared, like a rainbow breaking across storm clouds. "If this council has no place for mercy, then it has no place for us." That single statement was their sentence. Above, unseen by the delegates, vast arrays hidden in the void began to power up. Old weapons, forbidden by treaty, stirred awake under the elders' command. The fate of the Orwani was sealed before the words even left their lips. The council chamber dissolved into murmurs and whispers, but beneath the ceremony, the decision had already been made. The Orwani would not live to see another century. The galaxy believed the council wise. The Orwani, standing defiant in the light, believed the council blind. The death of a star. The Orwani sun was quiet the day their sentence arrived. Its golden light bathed the crystalline towers of their homeworld, refracting through spires that had stood for 1,000 generations. Children played among the gardens of glass, and fleets orbited in calm formation, unaware that an invisible noose had already been drawn around them. The council's weapon waited, hidden in the heart of the star. Centuries earlier, long before the Orwani had discovered fire, the elders had seeded safeguards across the galaxy, devices meant to enforce order should any species stray too far from the path. They called them warden seeds, though among younger races they were only rumors, whispered threats of celestial retribution. Each seed was a singularity caged in quantum locks, capable of turning suns into executioners. At the appointed hour, the locks disengaged. The Orwani astronomers were the first to notice. In the deep observatories that floated beyond the homeworld's atmosphere, readings spiked, gravity warping where no mass should be. Alarms shrieked, echoing through the crystalline halls of science. "Impossible," one whispered, their voice fractured by panic. The star's core, it's collapsing inward. In the capital, the high voice stood on a balcony of glimmering crystal, watching the sky darken. The golden light dimmed, replaced by a violent red. The sun bulged and twisted, a monstrous heartbeat gone wrong. Then came the ejection. A wave of plasma and magnetic fury roared outward, slamming into orbiting fleets and shredding them like leaves in a hurricane. The defense armadas disintegrated, their shields nothing against a star's rage. Cities boiled as oceans flashed to steam. Billions died in moments. From the council chamber across the stars, the elders observed in silence. To them, it was not murder, it was correction. The Orwani had defied order, and now the evidence of their corruption burned away under the indifferent light of physics turned into a weapon. But some escaped. Hidden among the chaos, refugee fleets broke from the dying system. They carried only what they could: children, fragments of culture, fragments of hope. They scattered toward the outer rim, pursued by hunters sent to erase every witness. Their supplies dwindled. One by one, the fleeing fleets winked out, victims of sabotage, ambush, or starvation. Those who remained gathered, broken and desperate, around a choice no Orwani had ever considered: hide among the Deathworlders, the quarantine arm, the realm of humans. The High Voice, now a refugee among their own, whispered as their ship limped toward the Forbidden Zone. If mercy does not exist in the Council, perhaps it lies with those they fear most. The Orwani homeworld was ash. The Council congratulated themselves on another balance restored. But the galaxy had shifted. Their arrogance had created something new, a people who had nothing left to lose, seeking refuge in the shadow of humanity. Into the quarantine zone, the Orwani refugee fleets drifted like wounded animals through the dark. What had once been a proud interstellar civilization was now reduced to patched hulls, flickering reactors, and life support systems stretched beyond reason. Inside the crowded holds, thousands huddled shoulder to shoulder. Their crystalline forms dimmed, light no longer refracting through their bodies with the brilliance of health. Hunger dulled their colors. Some children had gone nearly opaque, their once shimmering skin clouded with the gray pallor of starvation. Another hydrocell failed. The voice crackled through the comms of the lead vessel. Rationing will be cut again, 4 liters per 1,000. A silence followed. Even for the Orwani, whose voices carried like chimes, despair was heavy. The choice. The High Voice gathered with the remaining fleet commanders in the fractured command dome of the flagship Radiant Shelter. A projection of the galaxy's spiral arms glimmered above them, distorted by the failing hollow emitters. The quarantine arm was marked in crimson, a region every council species was forbidden to enter. One commander, fractures running jagged across their crystalline skin, raised the objection all of them feared. To cross into that zone is to embrace death. The Deathworlders are unstable. Even the council fears them. The High Voice's reply rang clear, and yet it is the one place the council will not follow. They let the words hang. All knew it was true. The elders had caged humanity behind interdiction fields, woven space around Sol like a snare. To trespass into that prison was to abandon every protection and treaty, but it was also to vanish from the council's sight. Another commander whispered, the sound brittle, "Better to gamble on monsters than to die under pursuit." The pursuit. The choice made, the Orwani fleets turned toward the crimson-marked region. Behind them, council hunter-killers prowled the void. Sleek ships of the Creel Dominion and the smoke-shrouded phantoms of the Elders trailed their every move, striking when they faltered. At Vega's remnants, the Orwani lost a convoy. Dozens of refugee ships went dark as a hunter ambush cut them apart. Survivors watched in silence, powerless to help, while their kin fell into the abyss. At Eltonar's reach, another dozen ships starved, their food stores exhausted. They drifted into black holes of hunger and despair, their lights blinking out one by one. But still, the core of the fleet pressed on. Crossing the threshold. The quarantine zone was not marked by walls or fleets. It was marked by absence. As the Orwani ships crossed into the Forbidden Arm, every council hunter turned back. Not a single vessel pursued them further. In the silent void, that was more chilling than the battles. "They fear this place," one refugee whispered, pressing translucent fingers against a viewport. "What kind of beings make even the council step away?" No answer came. Only the darkness of Sol's arm awaited them. A shadow among shadows. The Orwani soon discovered the quarantine was not empty. Their long-range scanners caught flickers, signatures of ships that should not have been there. At first they thought them ghosts, artifacts of broken sensors. But then one ship's readings were unmistakable. A hull cobbled together with alien geometry and something crude. Not Council, not Orwani, something else. The high voice watched the readings appear, and though their crystalline form dimmed with exhaustion, their voice carried with a clarity that cut the silence. They are not blind. The Deathworlders know we are here. The Orwani had fled one doom only to stumble into another unknown. Yet here, in the shadow of humanity, they felt the faintest ember of hope. If the Council would not save them, perhaps the monsters could. Watchers in the dark. The briefing room was windowless, buried 5 stories beneath a decommissioned Air Force base in Nevada. The walls hummed faintly with the vibration of shielding generators designed to block every kind of scan known to man or alien. Colonel Grant Wash stood at the head of the table, fingers resting on a folder thick with classified reports. Around him, a dozen officers and analysts sat in silence. Some were uniformed, others wore plain suits with no insignia, but all bore the same look. They knew things the rest of the world could never be told. On the wall, a screen displayed a grainy image. 6 ships limping across the void, hulls fractured and bleeding energy trails. "Gentlemen," Wash began, voice even, 3 days ago, Deep Cold Array picked up signatures crossing the interdiction line. Not probes, not council cloaks, refugee traffic." A murmur rippled through the room. One of the analysts leaned forward, adjusting glasses. "Confirmed Orwani design, but degraded. Those ships shouldn't even be flying." "They shouldn't even be alive," another muttered. The Black Program. For decades, Project Sentinel had existed in shadows. Born from the wreckage of 2 downed observation craft in the mid-20th century, it had grown into humanity's hidden arm. While the Council believed Saul was blind, Project Sentinel watched the Watchers. Wash tapped the folder. Inside were schematics reverse-engineered from alien drives, scraps of shielding tech, fragments of cloaking arrays, none fully understood by human science but adapted, twisted, and weaponized by engineers who never took impossible as an answer. "The Council still thinks we're locked in our cage," Wash said. "But we've had eyes on their patrols for years. Now something's changed. Those ships weren't chased here for nothing." He clicked a control. The image shifted to a closer scan. One Orwani vessel, hull ruptured, power nearly gone. Inside, faint biosigns flickered. "Survivors," Wash confirmed. "Council didn't follow them in. They want them gone, not recovered. Which means we need to know why." Debate in the shadows. A naval officer leaned forward, face grim. "We should put them out of their misery. If the Council burned their world, they had a reason. Bringing them in risks exposure." Across the table, an Air Force general shook his head. "You don't torch a homeworld unless you're covering something up. And if the Orwani crossed into our quarantine, maybe they know something the Council doesn't want us to hear." The analyst in glasses cleared his throat. "Sir, what if the Council was right? What if they're dangerous?" Wash let the question linger. Then he said the words that carried the paradox of humanity. "Doesn't matter. We'll save them, and if they are dangerous, we'll find a way to fight them too." A bitter chuckle rolled through the room. Humanity in a sentence, compassion sharpened into a blade. "Orders." The colonel turned to the screen again. "Task Force Black Lance will intercept. Quiet. No world governments. No NATO oversight. If these Orwani are running from the Council, we need to know why before the Council decides to finish the job in our backyard." He paused, voice lower. "And gentlemen, remember this. The Council already thinks we're a mistake of evolution. They expect us to fight, to kill, to conquer. Maybe this is our chance to show them they were wrong, or prove them right on our own terms." The lights dimmed as the operation codes appeared on screen. Across the table, hardened men and women prepared for the impossible. Some would call it mercy, others would call it suicide. But to humanity, it was just another mission. As Black Lance ships launched from hidden hangars that didn't officially exist, humanity stepped into the role the Council had always feared. Deathworlders who could choose to save. And for the first time in centuries, the Orwani were not alone. First contact. The Orwani fleet drifted in silence. Their ships were dying, reactors flickering, atmosphere systems choking on their last cycles. In the command chamber of the Radiant Shelter, the high voice stood among fractured hollow screens that bled static. They had expected pursuit. They had expected destruction. Instead, something else arrived. Predators in the void. The first human vessel came in fast, black against the stars, its hull angles jagged and irregular. It did not shine with the sleek precision of Council craft. It looked predatory. When the Orwani scans touched it, they recoiled. The ship was built from alloys not their own, patched with geometries clearly alien, yet powered by cores they recognized. Orwani fragments, Council tech, twisted together into something new, something raw. "They cannibalize," whispered one officer, crystalline skin dulled from hunger. "They break apart what they find and turn it into weapons." More ships appeared, smaller escorts fanned out like hunters circling prey. Their hulls carried strange markings, symbols etched in white against dark steel, angular, foreign. To the Orwani, they looked like teeth. Panic rippled through the refugee fleet. The voice of mercy, a channel opened. Not Council tones, not Orwani resonance. A voice carried through the void, flat and human, but clear. "This is Colonel Grant Wash, United States Air Force. You've crossed into restricted space. We are aware of your losses. Hold position and do not arm your weapons. We will render aid." The Orwani officers exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected threats, ultimatums, domination. Instead, the Predator's first words had been an offer of help. The high voice hesitated. Their body refracted dim light into a trembling rainbow. Finally, they replied, tones hesitant. "We are refugees. Our home is gone. The Council hunts us. If you intend to finish what they began, then end it quickly." A pause. Then Wash's voice again, steady, almost harsh. "We're not the Council." The meeting hours later, a shuttle from Radiant Shelter locked onto a human docking bay. The Orwani delegation entered cautiously, crystalline feet tapping against steel floors, their bodies glowing faintly in the dim light. The humans waited. Marines in matte black armor stood at attention, weapons lowered but present. Their faces were unreadable, their movements efficient, their eyes sharp. Predators, yes, but disciplined ones. When the high voice stepped forward, they felt it. The humans' fear tightly leashed beneath duty. Not weakness, but choice. One Marine, helmet under his arm, offered a canister of water. His hands shook slightly as he extended it. "You look thirsty." The Orwani accepted. The liquid shimmered inside them, refracting into light once more. A small brightness returned to their crystalline skin. For the first time since their star had died, the high voice felt something that was not fear. The realization later, aboard the human vessel, the Orwani delegation was led past hangars and laboratories. What they saw stunned them more than Council weapons ever could. Engines built from alien fragments, shields humming with resonance that mirrored Council tech, but reshaped, improved, hardened. Human scientists, engineers, soldiers working side by side, turning scraps into something dangerous and alive. These were not primitives locked in a cage. These were predators waiting for the moment the cage door opened. The high voice whispered to their second, "The Council feared them not because they destroy, but because they learn." And in that realization, fear gave way to cautious hope. The Orwani had expected death in the hands of Deathworlders. Instead, they found survivors, different, dangerous, but not without mercy. For the first time since their exile began, they began to believe the Council's lies could be broken. The interrogation, the room was cold, deliberately so. Harsh lights cast sterile beams across the glass-like skin of the Orwani delegation. The high voice sat at the center of the table, posture rigid, refracted light across their body dim but steady. Around them, humans in dark uniforms formed a silent wall, predators studying prey. Colonel Grant Wash leaned forward, hands folded. His voice was steady, almost bored. "Let's start simple. Why did the Council burn your world?" The high voice's tones rang faintly, vibrating against the walls. "Because we would not be silent. Because mercy was not permitted." Wash's eyes narrowed. "That's not an answer. Evidence says you enslaved those you rescued. That's the Council record. Prove otherwise." The Orwani's crystalline shoulders stiffened. Their voice trembled like brittle glass. "Lies planted by those who feared us. Do you believe every judgment handed down by those who call themselves gods?" Wash slammed a file onto the table. Inside were translated Council archives, doctored images of Orwani colonies, falsified accounts of subjugation. "This is what they've shown the galaxy, that you're tyrants hiding behind pity." The high voice leaned forward, light refracting brighter, voice suddenly sharp. If we were tyrants, Colonel, would we be here, starving, hunted, begging Deathworlders for a chance to live? The silence in the room cut like a blade. The civilian push hours later, in a secure chamber 2 levels above, the Civilian Oversight Committee gathered. The President of the United States sat among advisors and representatives from allied nations. Grainy footage of the Orwani interrogation played on the screen. Colonel Wash is right to be cautious, said the Secretary of Defense. We can't trust refugees from a destroyed empire with unknown motives. For all we know, this is bait. The President shook his head. And if it isn't, if what they're saying is true, then the galaxy isn't what we thought. It's worse. The Council isn't protecting the stars, they're curating them, killing those who don't fit their order. Another advisor leaned forward, voice low. The world doesn't even know the Council exists. We've hidden everything under black projects for 70 years. If we acknowledge the Orwani, we acknowledge the Council, the cage, the quarantine. The room fell silent. It was the President herself who finally said it. Then maybe it's time the world knew. The dilemma. Back in the interrogation chamber, Wash received new orders. Not to execute, not to expel, but to prepare for disclosure. He didn't like it. They're dangerous, he told the committee via secure channel. Every instinct I have says they're trouble, but if we're going to step into the galactic stage, we don't do it blind. We don't do it divided. The President's voice crackled through the encrypted line. Then help them, and make damn sure we don't become what the Council thinks we are. Wash closed the line, jaw tight. To his soldiers, he said, "Get ready. We're about to tell 7 billion people the truth about the universe." The Orwani's realization, in their holding cell, the high voice felt the shift. Guards stood less rigidly, the interrogations softened. Whispers of something larger filtered in, debates, divisions, and above all, the possibility that humanity might tear itself apart once the secret was revealed. The Orwani's second-in-command asked, hesitant, "Do you think they will destroy themselves?" The high voice's prismed light flared brighter, resolute. No, they will argue, they will rage, but they will unite. Because unlike the Council, they are not afraid of what they are. They will fight to save, even when it costs them everything. The decision had been made. For the first time in history, humanity would look into the void together, not as fractured nations, but as a species. The Council believed humans incapable of change. Soon, the galaxy would find out if they were right. The revelation. The United Nations headquarters in New York had never been so heavily guarded. Streets were sealed for blocks, skies patrolled by fighter jets, every satellite in orbit redirected to broadcast a single feed. Inside the chamber, representatives of nearly every nation sat in tense silence. No petty arguments, no procedural delays. The world had been summoned for something greater than any one nation's pride. At the dais, the Secretary General adjusted his papers with shaking hands. Cameras framed his every movement, streaming live to billions across the planet. "My fellow citizens of Earth," he began, voice resonating in a dozen simultaneous translations. "For 70 years, the governments of this world have carried a burden hidden from you. Today, we must share that truth, not as nations, but as one people." The unveiling, the screens behind him flickered. Images filled the air. The shimmering, crystalline forms of the Orwani refugees, gaunt and dimmed with hunger. The ruins of their shattered fleets, drifting husks scarred by plasma storms. And then, worse, footage smuggled from Council archives showing the artificial collapse of the Orwani star. Billions erased in silence. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Across the globe, living rooms, city squares, and rural towns fell into stunned quiet. Humanity had always asked if they were alone. The answer was not just yes. It was that they were feared, judged, and caged. The Secretary General's voice grew harder. The Galactic Council, the so-called arbiters of order, declared our species too dangerous to be free. They sealed our stars from the galaxy. They destroyed those who resisted their arrogance. The Orwani people stand before us today, not as conquerors, but as survivors of the Council's tyranny. He gestured, and the high voice of the Orwani stepped forward. Their crystalline skin shimmered faintly under Earth's artificial lights. For a moment, the chamber seemed to hold its breath. The Orwani's testimony. "My name is High Voice Taloran. the Orwani said, tones resonating like chimes carried on the wind. We were condemned because we chose mercy. The council called us slavers, liars, tyrants. But mercy leaves no empire. It leaves only scars, and those scars we carry now. We sought shelter here, among the people the council fears most. Their refracted light flared, glancing across human faces, soldiers, diplomats, civilians alike. And I say to you, they fear you because you are like us, because you will not be silent, because you fight to save even when you are told it is forbidden. The fractured reactions across the globe, reactions fractured instantly. In the streets of Cairo, crowds erupted in prayer. In Moscow, military leaders demanded mobilization. In Beijing, the government declared the need for centralized planetary defense. In Washington, protests flared outside the Capitol, half demanding war, half demanding peace. But amid the chaos, something deeper stirred: unity. For the first time in history, every human saw the same enemy, the same truth. They were not insignificant. They were not alone. They were judged, and they had a choice: the president's words. Finally, the President of the United States addressed the assembly. Her voice was steady, carrying not just to the chamber, but across every screen in the world. We are not children to be caged. We are not monsters to be destroyed. We are humanity, and today we stand together. Applause thundered through the chamber. It rolled out into the streets of New York, echoed across continents, reverberated in refugee camps and skyscrapers alike. For the first time since the dawn of fire, humanity faced the universe not in isolation, but united. The council had sought to hide the truth behind silence. Instead, their lies had birthed something more dangerous than they imagined: a united Earth, aware of its cage, and ready to decide whether to break it. The Senate of Exiles. The emergency session of the newly formed Earth Orwani Senate met in the repurposed halls of the UN General Assembly. The flags of nations still lined the walls, but alongside them now hung a banner of refracted light, the Orwani emblem of survival. For the first time in history, humans and aliens shared the same chamber as equals. Delegates filled the room: human leaders in tailored suits, military officers in dress uniforms, and Orwani envoys whose crystalline forms glimmered under the artificial lights. The chamber buzzed with languages, tones, and voices, layered into a strange harmony of species learning to speak together. At the center stood Colonel Grant Wash, no longer the shadow of a black project, but the chosen military liaison of Earth's United Command. His presence reminded everyone in the chamber of what was at stake. The first exchange high-voiced, Taloran stepped forward, carrying a crystalline data core. Their resonant tones filled the room. We escaped with fragments. Our archives, our science, our maps, they are incomplete, damaged, but they are yours. Knowledge from every council race we aided, stolen at great cost. They set the crystal on the central dais. Light flared, blooming into projections across the chamber. Blueprints of technologies the council forbade younger species from ever touching. Medical advances that could halt organ failure, rebuild broken DNA, erase plagues. Energy systems more efficient than anything humanity had dreamed, capable of ending fossil dependence in a generation. Defense schematics for weapons, shields, and starship drives, the secrets the council kept locked behind interdiction. The room erupted. Delegates leaned forward, some exclaiming in awe, others in fear. For scientists, it was a dream. For generals, it was a revolution. For politicians, it was a burden too heavy to control. The debate. The French ambassador rose first. If we share this knowledge openly, chaos will follow. Nations will race to outpace each other, and unity will fracture before it begins. A Chinese general countered, voice hard. Secrecy is no longer an option. If the council comes, they will not care for your borders. We must arm as one or die as many. The British Prime Minister added, if we reveal everything, we may destroy ourselves faster than the council ever could. The history of our species is proof of that. Silence followed, heavy with truth. Humanity's duality, the instinct to save and the instinct to conquer, loomed over every decision. It was the Orwani who cut through the noise. High-voiced Taloran raised a crystalline hand, tones ringing sharp and clear. The council counted on this. They believed division would break you. They believed fear would silence us. Prove them wrong. The Senate forms by day's end, compromises were struck. The Earth Orwani Senate was born, a joint body where every nation and the Orwani remnants held seats, their votes tied to shared survival. No single nation would hoard the Orwani archives. No single general would command Earth's response. Instead, a new command structure emerged, United Earth Defense, advised by Orwani strategists who had survived Council warfare. Black projects that once hid in shadows, Sentinel, Black Lance, Ghost Array, were absorbed into this new framework, their secrets now shared across borders. For the first time in history, the fractured nations of Earth agreed to speak with one voice. The military vision Colonel Wash addressed the chamber in closing. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of inevitability. We don't know when the Council will act, but they will. They've seen us united, and they will not allow it to stand. If we wait for mercy, we'll die like the Orwani homeworld. If we prepare, if we fight, then maybe, just maybe, we'll have a chance. He glanced at the Orwani beside him, then back to the human delegates. And if they come for us, I say we don't just survive. We make them remember why they feared us in the first place. The Senate adjourned, but the world had changed. Humanity and Orwani stood together, not just as survivors, but as architects of something new. The Council believed they had sealed Earth behind bars. Instead, they had built a forge. And in that forge, weapons, alliances, and defiance were beginning to take shape. Forging the arsenal, the hangars of Groom Lake were no longer filled with experimental aircraft. Now they echoed with the clamor of something stranger. Starship hulls under construction, scaffolds wrapped around engines that hummed with Orwani cores, and test chambers where plasma weapons flared like miniature suns. Colonel Grant Wash strode through the facility, shadowed by Orwani engineers and human generals. Everywhere, sparks flew, welders cut, and prototypes roared to life. The world had gone to war, not with each other, but with the void itself. The engines of survival, Dr. Amina Patel, lead scientist of Project Sentinel, pointed to a row of enormous drives half-assembled on the floor. Orwani pulse-fold engines, damaged when we recovered them, but we've rebuilt the design. They can't match Council speed, but they'll move us between stars. We'll have strike capacity, not just defense. Wash ran a hand over the cold alloy of a drive casing. To him, it wasn't science, it was survival. How soon? Patel exhaled. 2 years, maybe 1 if every nation keeps feeding resources. But if the Council comes sooner, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. Weaponizing hope. On the test range, soldiers fired the first human-built plasma rifles. The weapons hummed with resonance cores adapted from Orwani designs, energy channeled into bolts that burned through tank armor like paper. Marines joked as they tested bayonets on the rifles' ends, because even in the age of plasma, some things never changed. Engineers had turned Orwani shield harmonics into armored plating. It wasn't perfect, but it could shrug off munitions that once tore through steel. Some prototypes even adapted the shielding into personal exosuits. Heavy, bulky frames that let soldiers carry weapons far larger than their bodies should. The Orwani looked on in awe, sometimes in horror, as humanity did what they always did. Turn salvation into steel, the debate in command. In the Senate's secure chamber, admirals and generals clashed over doctrine. We build fleets of heavy warships, argued Admiral Kawano of Japan. We stand toe-to-toe with Council battle lines, prove humanity's strength. No, countered General Ruiz of Brazil. We use what we are, unpredictable, fast, ruthless, swarm tactics, strike where they don't expect, fight like insurgents in space. Colonel Wash cut through the noise. You're both right. We can't match them in numbers. We can't match them in polish. But we can bleed them. Make every victory cost them more than they can afford. The Orwani strategist Taloran tilted their crystalline head, light flickering across their body. That is why they feared you. Not because you destroy, but because you refuse to stop. The birth of a fleet shipyard sprouted overnight in orbit. The International Space Station was dismantled, its modules refitted into dry docks for the first human starships. Nuclear submarines were gutted and reassembled into space-capable hulls. Factories that once built cars now hammered out plating for orbital interceptors. The first class of warship rolled from its berth 6 months later, the UES Valiant, a hybrid of Orwani resonance cores and human ingenuity. Its hull was rough, uneven, ugly, but alive. When its engines lit for the first time, arcs of energy rippled across the void, and Earth cheered. It was no longer a question of if humanity would fight. It was only when. The Council believed humanity's quarantine would keep them docile, primitive, contained. Instead, they had given humans time to prepare. And now, with Orwani knowledge fueling their drive, humanity was building an arsenal that even the galaxy's elders had not anticipated. The forge was hot, the hammers unrelenting. Earth was arming itself for war. The Council in shadows. The Council chamber was a cathedral of light, suspended above the churning clouds of a gas giant. Spires of crystal and arcs of living metal curved into a dome, its walls shifting with projections of stars and nebulae. Delegates from dozens of civilizations filled the tiers, but all eyes turned toward the highest dais, where the elders gathered. The mood was darker than ever before. The Orwani extermination had been meant to end debate, to silence dissent. Instead, whispers of survivors had reached the chamber, whispers that they had fled into the one place the Council dared not follow. The quarantine arm, humanity's prison. The eldest speaks Arathar of the Creel Dominion, carapace gleaming like obsidian, clacked his mandibles sharply. The evidence is undeniable. The Deathworlders have united. They have armed. And worse, they shelter the Orwani traitors. This is an infection festering in the wound we sealed centuries ago. The chamber rippled with unease. Delegates shifted in their seats, some muttering assent, others glancing nervously at the elders who had authorized the Orwani's destruction. A being of living smoke drifted forward, voice like a whisper across a graveyard. We should have erased humanity when we had the chance. Their nature has not changed. They kill, they conquer, they pretend at mercy. Now they will spread it like a plague. The younger voices, a delegate from the Valari Compact, younger and less cowed by the elders, dared to speak. Or perhaps they will save what you would destroy. The Orwani argued for compassion, and you silenced them. Now another species rises to take their place. Are we so certain we are wiser than every voice but our own? The chamber erupted in angry tones. Some shouted for the Valari to be censored, others demanded silence. The elders did not strike them down, but their shadow fell heavy across the dissent. The Council's hubris High Elder Zathar, whose body was a lattice of crystal older than most stars, raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. Young races cannot comprehend what we guard. We have seen empires rise and burn themselves out in fire. We have seen compassion twisted into chains, mercy into conquest. Humanity is no different. They build as quickly as they destroy. They save only to sharpen the blade that kills. Arathar leaned forward. Then we act, not later, now, before their forges fill the sky. The debate some elders counseled caution. The quarantine was meant to contain, not provoke. If we march into their arm, we risk legitimizing their defiance. Others pressed for preemptive war. Strike their forges, burn their fleets in their berths, before they are strong enough to resist. Still others whispered of subtler methods, infiltration, sabotage, assassins cloaked in council shadow. Humanity could be broken from within, just as the Orwani had been discredited before their fall. The decision hours of debate, High Elder Zathar pronounced the verdict. We will not act openly, not yet. The galaxy must not see us as tyrants again. We will send our shades, our hidden hands. Let humanity choke on its own division, as it always has. When they falter, we will erase them quietly, as we should have centuries ago. A ripple of agreement passed through the chamber. Yet beneath it, unease lingered. The Valari delegate whispered to an ally, "They think humanity will falter. I think they will surprise us all." The council rose in arrogance, convinced of their wisdom, blind to their own cracks. They would not strike openly, not yet, but their shadows would reach into the quarantine arm, seeking to smother Earth's forge before it could blaze. Unseen by them, humanity and the Orwani were already preparing for the storm. Shadows in the quarantine. The council's hidden ships slipped across the void like wraiths. Cloaked assassins boarded civilian freighters. Saboteurs infiltrated supply convoys with false ident codes. Spies disguised in stolen flesh suits landed on Earth under the cover of storms. The elders had wagered that humanity, still fractured in spirit, would be blind to subtlety, that their paranoia was a weakness, that they could be manipulated like the Orwani had been. They were wrong. The vanishings. The first assassin never made it past the dockyards. Cameras tracked movements no human eye should have seen. Automated turrets turned without warning, cutting through cloaks with bursts of plasma fire. The body was never recovered. The second vanished in New Delhi. Disguised as a refugee, the infiltrator slipped into a relief camp where Orwani children received medical care. He never emerged. Witnesses only recalled the moment Marines closed the perimeter, eyes hard, movements precise, as if they'd been expecting him all along. By the end of the month, every council shadow was gone. Not captured, not exposed, erased. The quarantine arm became a graveyard of silence. Council whispers spread quickly. The Deathworlders knew. The Deathworlders were waiting. Human paranoia as doctrine. In a subterranean briefing chamber beneath Colorado, Colonel Wash stood before the Earth Orwani Senate Security Council. They thought we wouldn't see it coming, but we've spent our entire existence expecting the knife in the dark. He tapped the screen. Images of council infiltration attempts flickered one by one, each stamped terminated. This is the difference between us and them. They think in centuries. We think in seconds. Every shadow they send into this system belongs to us the moment it crosses the line. Taloran, the high voice of the Orwani, inclined their head. Their crystalline body shimmered faintly. You have turned paranoia into survival. Where the council sees chaos, I see discipline. Wash smirked. Discipline? No, habit. We've been planning for the worst since we learned how to throw rocks. The Senate accelerates news of the failed sabotage, galvanized the Senate. No longer cautious, no longer divided, they voted unanimously to accelerate mobilization. Orbital yards expanded threefold, ringed with layers of drones and rail batteries. Nations stripped their stockpiles of uranium and deuterium, funneling it into reactor cores for warships. Orwani engineers released caches of forbidden schematics, unlocking weapons the Council had buried for millennia. Factories in Detroit, Shanghai, São Paulo, and Johannesburg switched from cars and electronics to plating, cannons, and engines. The Earth Orwani fleet doubled in size before the Council even realized their shadows had failed. The message. In a rare public address, the Senate broadcast a simple message across the quarantine boundary. It was encrypted in dozens of council dialects, impossible to ignore. To the elders who watch, we know your shadows walk among us. They have not returned. They will not return. If you wish to test humanity, come yourselves. We are ready. The council's arrogance had cost them dearly. What was meant to be a quiet suffocation became a rallying cry. Humanity, once caged, now roared. And beside them, the Orwani glimmered brighter than they had since their star had died. The forge was burning hotter. War was no longer a question of if, it was a question of when. The shakedown cruise. The elders did not argue this time. No debate, no delay. Humanity had defied their shadows and silenced their assassins. The solution was the same one they had used against the Orwani. Erase the star. Deep within Sol's heart, the hidden seed stirred. A black sphere of compressed gravity, dormant for centuries, awaiting activation. Quantum locks cracked open, its singularity preparing to unravel the star's balance. But unlike the Orwani, humanity had been warned. The hunt for the seed. The Orwani had told their story in precise detail. The sudden spike in gravitational distortion, the impossible readings, the doom that came too quickly to fight. Earth's scientists had listened. Earth's generals had believed. Now, in orbit around the sun, a fleet of drones and ships scanned relentlessly. Data poured back into underground bunkers, where physicists and engineers traced faint anomalies like hunters tracking blood in snow. It was Dr. Patel who found it first. A subtle distortion buried in the sun's corona, dormant but undeniable. There, she whispered, pointing at the screen. Their weapon. The same one that killed Orwani Prime. Colonel Wash stood behind her, arms folded, his jaw tightened. Then we kill it first. Operation Starshield. The mission was dangerous, bordering on suicidal. A modified fusion bomber, shielded with experimental Orwani plating, dove into the solar corona. Pilots from a dozen nations guided it in silence, their craft buffeted by the fury of Sol itself. At the edge of the seed's influence, they released their payload, a resonance charge designed by Orwani survivors and human engineers working side by side. The sun trembled. For one terrible moment, alarms screamed across Earth as solar winds surged and coronal flares lashed outward. Power grids flickered, satellites fell silent. Humanity held its breath, waiting for apocalypse. Then the readings stabilized. The singularity collapsed in on itself, shredding under the resonance. The weapon was gone. The same doom that had erased the Orwani had failed against Earth. The launch of the Valiant days later, the UES Valiant stood ready in orbit. Its hull was a patchwork of human steel and Orwani crystal, rough but powerful. Engines glowed with hybrid drives. Weapons bristled along its flanks. Railguns, plasma batteries, and missile tubes never meant to exist in the same design, all stitched together by sheer necessity. Crowds filled cities across Earth, watching on massive screens as the fleet prepared. Marines in exosuits stood at attention on carrier decks. Orwani envoys walked among them, shimmering faintly with renewed pride. "This is not conquest," high-voiced Taloran declared during the broadcast. "This is survival. This is defiance. We launch not as conquerors, but as those who will not kneel." On the bridge of the Valiant, Colonel Wash gave the order. "Helm, take us out. Let the galaxy know humanity is no longer caged." Engines roared. The fleet surged past the orbit of Pluto, beyond the edge of Sol, into the black beyond. For the first time in history, humanity's warships crossed into interstellar space, not as shadows, but as a storm. The Elders watched far away. In the council chamber, the Elders received the reports: the failed weapon, the destroyed seed, the human fleet breaking free of its cage. Mandibles clicked, voices of smoke hissed. "They found it," Arathar spat. "They destroyed it before it could ignite." Another Elder whispered, voice heavy with something almost like fear. "The Orwani never warned us, but they warned them. Now the Deathworlders have what no other ever had, the knowledge of our oldest weapon and the will to hunt it down." No more debate followed, only silence and the dawning realization that humanity was not waiting to be judged. The Council's ultimate sanction had failed. Humanity had proven itself unkillable in the way the galaxy most feared: paranoid, creative, relentless. And now, with the Valiant's engines burning bright, Earth was no longer quarantined. It was on the march, weapons free. The UES Valiant slid through the void beyond Sol, flanked by its escorts. To the crew, it was more than a shakedown cruise. It was humanity's first act of defiance, a declaration that the cage no longer held. The fleet's mission was simple: test engines, calibrate weapons, and establish relay points beyond the quarantine arm. But what they found was not empty stars. The galaxy's scars. The first sign came at Altara's reach, where an entire planet's surface had been glassed. Orwani records marked it once as fertile, a world of forests and oceans. Now it was ash, stripped bare. The second came at Vare Station, where a council inspection fleet hovered in orbit above a frontier colony. The station's inhabitants, farmers, miners, children, were lined up for compliance checks. Those who spoke out were dragged away. None returned. From the Valiant's bridge, Admiral Sherman T. Washington watched the feeds with a tightening jaw. He had studied history: Bastogne, Hugh City, Chosin Reservoir, but seeing cruelty on this scale kindled something deeper. "These aren't laws," he muttered. "They're chains." Taloran, standing beside him, flickered with grim resonance. "This is the order we defied. Mercy is forbidden. Resistance is erased. Now you see what we fought to stop." Sherman nodded once. His decision was growing heavier by the minute. The ambush, it came without warning. As the Valiant maneuvered near the edge of the system, space rippled. Dozens of Council warships decloaked in perfect formation, sleek vessels bristling with weaponry, hulls etched with the markings of the Elders' fleets. Alarms blared. "Multiple contacts, closing fast." Council transmissions cut across every channel. "Return to your cage, abandon your ships, submit or be annihilated." On the bridge, silence held for a heartbeat. Marines at their stations gripped weapons. Engineers whispered final prayers to machines. The crew looked to Admiral Sherman. The decision Sherman stood still, staring at the display. The Valiant was outnumbered 5-1. This was supposed to be a test flight, not a war. The cautious move was to retreat, preserve the fleet, live to fight another day. But the images burned in his mind. The glassed world, the silenced colonists, the Orwani's haunted eyes. If they ran now, the Council would tighten its grip. The galaxy would remain a prison for every species outside the Elders' favor. Sherman raised his calm. His voice was steady, iron-willed. "To all ships, the Council thinks we came here to test engines. They think we're afraid. They think we'll bow. They're wrong." He paused, breath tight. Then he gave the order that would echo across history: "Go weapons free." The battle ignites. The Valiant's guns lit the void first. Rail slugs screaming through space, plasma batteries flaring, missiles streaking like burning lances. Council ships reeled as shields cracked under fire they had never accounted for. Human ingenuity, human brutality, human refusal to yield. Escorts darted among enemy formations, swarming with unpredictable maneuvers. Marines in exosuits launched from dropships, boarding vessels that had never prepared for Deathworld tactics. The Orwani aboard the Valiant watched in awe as humans fought not like orderly fleets, but like predators unleashed. Chaos became strategy. Discipline sharpened chaos into victory. The turning point, a Creel battlecruiser loomed, its main batteries charging. The Valiant's shields flickered, plasma fire hammering against the hybrid plating. For a moment, the bridge shook with the weight of incoming fire. Sherman gripped the railing, teeth clenched. "Bring the railgun batteries to bear. Put everything we've got into their core." The ship's spine shook. A final volley tore through the Creel cruiser's heart. It exploded in silence, fire blooming across the void. A cheer erupted on the Valiant's bridge. For the first time, Council blood had been spilled by Deathworld hands. The ambush was meant to terrify, to remind humanity of its place. Instead, it had revealed the Council's first real defeat in centuries. Admiral Sherman stood at the viewport, watching wreckage drift into the dark. His voice carried across the fleet. "They wanted to test us. They got their answer. And this is just the beginning." Echoes of defiance, the aftermath. The battlefield around Vare Station was a graveyard of wreckage. Shattered Council warships drifted silently, their glowing cores spilling fragments of energy into the void. Smoke trailed from ruined hulls as the blackness swallowed their light. The US Valiant and its escorts held position, shields scarred but intact. Marines in exosuits swarmed across crippled Council vessels, cutting through bulkheads and dragging survivors back in chains. In the hangar bays, the first prisoners were marched off Council transports. The galaxy's self-proclaimed arbiters, soldiers of the Elders, now stood disarmed and trembling before Deathworlders. Marines joked darkly as they stripped them of weapons, one muttering, "First time in history we've taken aliens alive." Bet the Council didn't plan on that. In the command chamber, Admiral Sherman Washington reviewed reports with high-voiced Talaran at his side. "Losses?" Sherman asked. "Minor," came the reply from his operations chief. 2 escorts heavily damaged, 33 dead, 90 wounded. Council losses. He glanced at the feed. "Catastrophic." Sherman nodded grimly. He'd seen victories before, but this felt different. Not a skirmish, not a desperate defense. It was a statement. "They'll come harder next time," he said. Taloran inclined their crystalline head, voice resonant with cautious hope.
"Yes."
But today, the galaxy saw something they had forgotten, that the Council can bleed. The Council's chamber light filled the great chamber as the Elders convened. Normally serene, the projections of stars flickered erratically, as if the galaxy itself recoiled from the news. Erithar of the Creel Dominion slammed a clawed hand against the dice, mandibles clattering in rage. Defeat. Against primitives. Against vermin. They slaughtered a battle group as if it were nothing. A being of smoke hissed, tendrils writhing. They fought like predators unbound. No formation, no doctrine, chaos, yet it devoured our order. High Elder Zathar, the crystalline patriarch, remained still. His voice was sharp, brittle as glass under pressure. "Tell me what you fear, Erithar, that they are strong, or that they are willing to be weak when it suits them." The chamber fell silent, because that was the truth. Humanity was not predictable. They could build weapons as easily as medicine, destroy as easily as save, and they had chosen to fight for someone else's freedom. "They have made a spectacle of us," a younger delegate whispered. Already whispers spread across the rim. Species ask, "If humans can defy the Council, why not us?" The Elders exchanged glances, the weight of ages pressing down. For the first time in centuries, doubt cracked their composure. 2 worlds, 2 futures on Earth, the Senate broadcast images of the captured Council fleet. Humanity cheered in the streets. For the first time since the quarantine, they felt not like prisoners, but like warriors stepping onto the galactic stage. In the Council chamber, silence reigned. The defeat was not just military, it was symbolic. Their aura of invincibility, carefully cultivated for millennia, had been shattered. And though they would not admit it aloud, every elder knew. The galaxy had changed. The Deathworlders had broken their chains. Humanity's first victory sent shockwaves in every direction. To Earth and the Orwani, it was proof of hope. To the Council, it was the first tremor of collapse. The war for the soul of the galaxy had begun. The weight of hope, the forge of Earth. Factories that once built cars now hammered out ship plating. Aircraft plants churned out fighters for vacuum, their wings stripped away, their engines replaced with resonance drives. Nuclear reactors were dismantled, their fuel diverted into the growing fleet. Orbital docks encircled Earth like iron rings. The Valiant was no longer alone. Sister ships emerged from scaffolds daily, each one larger, deadlier, forged from the desperation of survival and the Orwani's forbidden knowledge. Colonel Wash walked the length of one such dry dock, staring at the half-finished hull of the UES Resolute. He muttered to himself, "We're not building ships anymore, we're building promises." The messages, it began with whispers. Orwani long-range relays, repaired, boosted with human ingenuity, caught faint transmissions from the rim. Pleas for help, encrypted in languages Earth had never heard. Soon they poured in like a flood. A farming colony on Denethor 4, glassed for refusing to pay council tribute. A mining world whose children were seized as labor tithes. Entire fleets begging for weapons, training, hope. In the Senate chamber, messages scrolled endlessly across screens. Billions of voices, billions of eyes, all turned toward the newest star in the void, Earth. The French ambassador whispered what none dared say aloud. "We have become their last chance." The debate, the chamber erupted. Some demanded restraint. "We are not ready. Our fleets are untested. If we reach too far, the council will crush us." Others, Orwani and human alike, stood defiant. "If we turn away, we become the council, choosing who deserves to live, who deserves to die." Admiral Sherman cut through the noise. His voice was iron. "We didn't break the quarantine to hide. We did it to prove something, that no one decides our fate but us. And now the galaxy is asking if we'll decide theirs too." The chamber fell silent. The weight of responsibility was heavier than any fleet. "The mobilization accelerates Earth," answered with steel. Recruitment centers overflowed with volunteers, men and women who had grown up fighting wars on Earth, now pledging to fight for the galaxy. Orwani strategists trained human officers in tactics against council fleets, combining Deathworld chaos with centuries of hard-won experience. Scientists blurred the line between medicine and weaponry, plasma rifles with self-repairing cores, exosuits that could stabilize wounded soldiers mid-battle. The forge burned hotter. Humanity was becoming what the Council had feared, a predator that chose to protect. The shadow on the horizon. Then, as Earth's fleet swelled and hope spread across the stars, the alarms sounded. At the edge of the Sol system, beyond the orbit of Pluto, deep-range sensors caught a disturbance. Not council signatures, not Orwani, something else. Dozens of ships emerged from folded space, massive and silent. Their hulls bore no markings. Their engines glowed with a resonance unfamiliar to both human and Orwani records. On the Valiant's bridge, Admiral Sherman stared at the feed. His voice was low, steady. "Contact. Unknown fleet at the system's edge." No one in the chamber spoke. For the first time since humanity had broken free, the galaxy had come to their doorstep. Billions begged for Earth's protection. Earth had answered with fire, steel, and resolve. But before they could take their first step into the galaxy's defense, the galaxy had come to them, wrapped in shadows, unknown, and waiting. The unaligned fleet first contact at the edge. The Sol system's defense grid stood on high alert. Rail cannons on Luna tracked the incoming fleet, orbital drones fanned out, and the Valiant and her escorts surged into intercept formation. Every gun was primed, every pilot ready to die before letting strangers breach Earth's skies. On the bridge, Admiral Sherman Washington watched the tactical display as the unknown fleet closed. 30 ships, maybe more, sleek but scarred, their hulls patched with alloys unfamiliar to both human and Orwani records. "Identification?" Sherman demanded. Dr. Patel shook her head, fingers flying across the console. "Not Council, not Orwani. Their drives, they're old, very old." The silence in the room was heavy. Humanity had prepared for annihilation. What they had not prepared for was the unknown. Then a transmission broke through, the voice of strangers. A face appeared on the holoscreen, angular features, dark eyes that glowed faintly with bioluminescence. skin etched with patterns like starlight frozen in flesh. The voice carried a rough cadence, as if shaped by a language older than the council itself. I am Carith Vare, speaker of the Illyrian Accord. We come not as conquerors, but as kin. The council has hunted you as they have hunted us. We heard the cries of the Orwani. We saw your defiance, and we came. Gasps rippled across the bridge. The Orwani delegation standing behind Sherman surged forward, their crystalline bodies glowing brighter than they had in months. You survived? High-voiced Taloran whispered. We thought the council had erased you. Carith inclined his head. They tried, but like you, we endured. And when the Orwani refugees reached us, we swore, if ever hope arose, we would answer it. You are that hope. The Illyrian Accord. The Illyrian ships moved into orbit like guardians, not invaders. Their hulls bore scorch marks of centuries of skirmishes, but also the unmistakable modifications of Orwani engineers. Within their fleet were refugee ships carrying thousands of Orwani who had fled the Purge and hidden among the Illyrian stars. When the first transports docked with the Valiant, the reunion was overwhelming. Orwani survivors embraced kin they had thought lost forever. Resonant tones filled the hangars like a chorus of bells, carrying both grief and joy. Marines who had prepared for a fight lowered their weapons, watching in silence as history rewrote itself before their eyes. Taloran's voice rang out, brighter and stronger than it had ever been. Once we were scattered. Once we were silenced. But today we stand together, Orwani, Illyrian, and humanity. Sherman's realization. In the Senate chamber, Sherman addressed both Earth and their new allies. The Council believed isolation would keep us weak. Instead, it has united us. They thought their fear would break us. Instead, it has brought us strength. Look around. Our fleets grow. Our allies rise. We are no longer prisoners. We are a storm. Cheers thundered through the chamber. For the first time, Earth did not stand alone. The Council reacts far across the stars. The Council received the news. Not only had their ambush failed, not only had their ancient weapon been destroyed, now an unaligned race, one they had tolerated only because it kept to itself, had chosen to join the Deathworlders. Erithar of the Creel hissed in fury, mandibles snapping. It spreads. Their defiance spreads. If we do not crush them now, the galaxy will follow them. High Elder Zathar, for the first time, did not sound certain. His crystalline form flickered faintly as he whispered, "Perhaps it already has." The quarantine arm was no longer a cage. It had become a rallying point. Refugees, rebels, and outcasts now looked to Earth not as a prison, but as a beacon. The galaxy had shifted. The Council's grip was slipping, and in the shadows of Sol, the forge of defiance blazed brighter than ever. The breaking point. The mission of mercy. The UES Valiant did not sail alone anymore. Illyrian cruisers and Orwani transports accompanied it, their hulls patched but proud, their crews bound together by survival. When a signal reached them, a faint Orwani distress call from the far rim, the Senate wasted no time. A humanitarian fleet was assembled. Supply ships, medical transports, and a modest escort of warships. Volunteers flooded aboard, human doctors and engineers standing beside Orwani healers, all eager to save those they thought were still alive. As the fleet jumped into folded space, the galaxy dared to hope. Perhaps mercy had returned. The trap. What emerged at the coordinates was not a colony of survivors. Instead, Council warships waited in formation, sleek, cold, merciless. The humanitarian fleet had flown straight into an ambush. The first salvo hit without warning. Transports disintegrated in bursts of plasma. Medical ships screamed across comms, begging for aid as their hulls split open. Escort vessels fought desperately, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, unprepared for betrayal on this scale. One Orwani captain, last of her line, transmitted her final words before her ship was consumed. "Tell them, mercy cost us everything. Make it cost the Council more." And then the channel went dark, the Senate's grief. When word reached Earth, silence fell across the Senate chamber. No one spoke at first, no one moved. Then the Orwani delegation shattered the stillness, their tones ringing like glass breaking. Their grief resonated through the hall, vibrating in the bones of every human present. Marines clenched fists, civilians wept, even Illyrian delegates bowed their heads in sorrow. Admiral Sherman stood slowly, fists tight against the table. His voice was raw but steady. "They attacked healers, doctors, children. They didn't just declare war on us. They declared war on mercy itself. The chamber erupted. What had been cautious unity solidified into steel. No longer just an alliance of convenience, no longer just survival. Now it was vengeance. The council fractures in the Elder Chamber, the reports of the ambush were not met with triumph. Instead, ripples of dissent spread among the delegates. The Valari Compact's envoy stood defiant. You slaughtered those who came to heal. You betrayed everything you claimed to stand for. Arathar of the Creel slammed his mandibles, enraged. They were aiding traitors! They are traitors! Mercy breeds rebellion! But younger voices joined the Valari. The Arilthi envoy hissed, their scaled skin quivering with anger. And what did it breed today? A martyrdom that will haunt us. Every world will hear of this. Every world will ask if we are protectors or butchers. High Elder Sathar sat in silence, crystal body dimmed. For the first time in millennia, the unity of the council began to fracture, not from an enemy's attack, but from within. That night, Admiral Sherman addressed the united fleet. His image was broadcast across human cities, Orwani enclaves, Illyrian stations. They killed those who carried no weapons. They burned hope to ash. The council believes that mercy is weakness. We will prove them wrong. From this day forward, we fight not only for ourselves, but for every voice the council tried to silence. Marines roared in their barracks. Orwani voices rang in harmony. Illyrian crews raised blades to the stars. The alliance had been born in survival. Now it was tempered in fire. The council had meant to end hope. Instead, it had sealed its fate. The new alliance no longer fought to endure. It fought to win. And far from the chamber of the elders, cracks began to spread. For the first time, the council's throne trembled. The war of mercy, the strategy. The Senate chamber was no longer a place of debate, but of war. Holographic stars hovered above the central dais, each marked with red where council control ran deepest, and faint blue where alliance fleets had struck. Admiral Sherman stood before the gathered delegates. His voice carried the weight of the dead, the fury of the living. They think their greatest weapon is fear. They believe the galaxy trembles at the thought of their star killers. That ends today. The main Earth Orwani fleet will strike at their controllers, destroy the devices they've hidden, and rip their teeth out. The rest of us, he continued, pointing to the rimward stars, will hunt. Every council fleet we find, we hit. Every world they hold in chains, we free. We won't win by waiting for them to come to us. We win by burning their shadow out of the galaxy. The chamber erupted, not in debate, but in unanimous assent. The first strikes within days. The galaxy shuddered under the assault. At Zelth Prime, an Orwani-led flotilla ambushed a council convoy, cutting chains from a mining colony whose people had been tithed for generations. Above Vilar's Maw, human destroyers in swarm formation overwhelmed a fleet 3 times their size, their unpredictable maneuvers scattering disciplined lines into chaos. At the Train Rift, Illyrian cruisers slashed into council supply lines, vanishing into folded space before retaliation could land. Everywhere the Alliance struck, hope spread like wildfire. Species long resigned to silence began transmitting signals. Desperate pleas, come here, free us, save us, the heart of the storm. The U.S. Valiant, leading the combined Earth Orwani fleet, drove toward the most dangerous target of all, the star-destroying controllers. Guided by Orwani records, human scientists had identified the systems most likely to harbor the ancient devices. The mission was clear: find them, destroy them, erase forever the weapon that had doomed Orwani Prime. Sherman stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the void ahead. We don't just fight fleets today, we fight extinction itself. Beside him, Taloran's crystalline body glowed brighter than it had since their homeworld burned. And this time, they said softly, the stars will not die. The council reacts in the council chamber, panic spread among the elders. Reports poured in of shattered fleets, liberated colonies, and most of all, the destruction of their hidden weapons. One by one, systems went dark as Alliance fleets rooted out the forbidden seeds and tore them apart. Arathar of the Krail slammed the dice, mandibles clicking furiously. This cannot be allowed. Without the controllers, we cannot hold order. But a younger delegate, voice trembling, whispered the truth no elder wanted to hear. Order is already gone. They are not rebels anymore. They are a war. The turning point. At the edge of the Zathar Nebula, the Valiant closed in on a controller hidden deep within a red dwarf system. Council Guardians fought savagely, but the Alliance pressed harder. Marines stormed the facility, Orwani engineers guiding them through traps and wards. The final detonator was placed by a Marine sergeant and an Orwani survivor side by side. As the charge detonated, the forbidden device collapsed into a singular flash of light, destroyed forever. Sherman's voice echoed across the fleet, "One down, and we won't stop until the last is ash." The galaxy burned, but for the first time in living memory, it burned with hope. The Alliance was no longer merely surviving. It was dismantling the Council's greatest terror piece by piece, freeing world by world. And though the Elders fought with desperation, the cracks in their unity widened with every loss. The war for the galaxy's soul had become unstoppable. The price of liberation, the target. The planet Kalor Prime was one of the Council's proudest jewels. Its spires of living crystal stretched into the skies, powered by the forced labor of entire civilizations. For centuries, the Council had pointed to it as proof of their order, a world perfected by the wisdom of the Elders. To the oppressed, Kalor Prime was a symbol of chains. To the Alliance, it would become a symbol of freedom. The UES Valiant led the assault, its hybrid drives flaring as the fleet surged into orbit. Beside it, Orwani and Illyrian ships held formation, their weapons charged. Marines readied for boarding actions, eyes grim and steady. Admiral Sherman Washington stood at the viewport, his jaw tight. "This is the one they said could never fall. Make them choke on that lie." The battle for Kalor. The Council responded with fury. Battlecruisers descended from orbit, their hulls bristling with plasma batteries, their formations disciplined and unyielding. Fighters swarmed like hornets, weaving through Alliance lines. The Valiant's guns roared, rail slugs tearing through cruisers, plasma fire burning across the void. Illyrian ships darted in and out of formations, crippling engines and vanishing before the Council could adapt. Orwani destroyers, once hunted to extinction, now unleashed their vengeance with surgical precision. On the planet's surface, Marines stormed detention camps, tearing down Council banners. For the first time in living memory, Kalor's enslaved millions raised their voices in freedom's cry. Collision course, then came the turning point. A massive Council battlecruiser, its hull ablaze but engines still burning, broke formation. It turned not toward retreat, but toward ramming speed. Its course was clear, straight for the Valiant. On the bridge, alarms screamed, "Impact in 2 minutes!" Sherman gripped the railing, mind racing. The Valiant's weapons were drained, shields overloaded. A direct hit would shatter the flagship, and with it, the symbol of Earth's defiance. "Bring us about," Sherman barked. But the crew's silence told him what he already knew. They wouldn't make it. The Orwani's choice. The Orwani destroyer Radiant Defiance was closest. Its captain, Valor Kryn, opened a channel to the Valiant. Their crystalline form glowed with steady resolve. "Admiral Washington, you gave us hope when the stars betrayed us. Let us give you what the Orwani always promised, mercy at any cost." Sherman's voice broke through the calm. "Kryn, don't you dare. That's an order." Kryn's tones rang clear, a chime of finality. "With respect, Admiral, not all orders can be followed." The channel cut. The sacrifice, the Radiant Defiance surged forward, engines burning brighter than ever before. Its weapons flared in a final salvo, crippling the battlecruiser's shields. Then, with a flash of light that outshone the burning fleets around it, the Orwani ship rammed into the Council vessel's core. The explosion split the void in two. Both ships disintegrated in a storm of fire and shards, the shockwave rattling the Valiant but sparing it from destruction. On the bridge, silence fell. Every Marine, every officer, every Orwani aboard stood in reverent stillness. Sherman lowered his head, his voice, steady but heavy, carried across the fleet. "The Radiant Defiance has fallen. Remember their name. Remember their sacrifice. Today, Kalor is free because of them." The liberation. As the last Council ships broke and fled, the Alliance descended on Kalor Prime. Camps were opened, chains broken. Refugees poured into the streets, cheering the ships in the skies above. Kalor Prime, once a monument to tyranny, became the first world openly liberated from Council control. And every soul across the galaxy heard the story, that humanity, Illyrian and Orwani, had struck at the heart of the Council, and that freedom had come at the cost of sacrifice. The Alliance stood victorious, but victory carried weight. The Orwani had given their lives for humanity, proving once and for all that their cause was shared. The Council had lost more than a world. They had lost their aura of inevitability. The galaxy was no longer theirs to command. A new dawn, the fall of the Council. The Council chamber, once a monument of arrogance, towering above the storms of its gas giant, was in chaos. Delegates shouted, screamed, fled. Guards abandoned their posts as news poured in. Kalor Prime liberated. Starkiller controllers destroyed. Fleets shattered across a dozen systems. For millennia, the Elders had ruled through fear. Now fear turned inward. Arathar of the Creel Dominion slammed his mandibles, voice shrill with desperation. "We must rally! Call the core fleets! Hold the line!" But no answer came. The fleets were gone, shattered or defecting. The younger races were no longer listening. The Elders, once gods, were exposed as tyrants. High Elder Zathar, his crystalline form flickering dimly, slumped into silence. His final words, whispered like breaking glass, echoed through the chamber. "We thought ourselves eternal. We were wrong." The Council was no more. The Senate of the Free at Geneva, where humanity's United Nations once debated over borders and trade, a new Senate gathered. Its hall was rebuilt with Orwani crystal and Illyrian steel, its dome open to the stars. Inside, humans, Orwani, Illyrian, and envoys from newly freed worlds filled the chamber. No thrones, no dais above the others, only a circle where each voice carried equal weight. High-voiced Talaran stood with Admiral Sherman Washington and Kareth Vare of the Illyrian Accord at the center. Together, they addressed not just the chamber, but every liberated world across the stars. "We are not here to rule," Talaran declared, their tones resonating like bells of light. "We are here to guide. The Council fell because it sought to silence. We will endure because we choose to listen." Sherman's voice followed, steady and resolute. "Earth will not stand above you. We will stand beside you. The Sol system is no longer only humanity's home. It belongs also to the Orwani who survived its darkest hour, and the Illyrian who answered when hope was nearly gone. Together we will keep this alliance true." Kareth Vare lifted a blade etched with Illyrian sigils. "Then let this be our oath. Not chains, not silence, not fear. From this day the stars belong to those who choose freedom." A shared soul. And so it began. On Mars, Orwani cities of refracted crystal rose beside human domes. On Luna, Illyrian shipyards bloomed, crafting fleets that would defend all, not one. On Earth itself, children of three species played beneath skies filled with starships that no longer watched in secret, but guarded openly. The Sol system, once a prison, became the heart of the galaxy's newest Senate, a beacon not of domination, but of choice. The legacy of defiance. From world to world, whispers spread. The Council had fallen. The Alliance had risen. For the first time in millennia, the stars were not ruled, but shared. And though scars of war remained, hope was stronger. Humanity's duality, its power to destroy and its will to save, had not doomed the galaxy. It had saved it. On the steps of the Senate Hall, Admiral Sherman Washington spoke to the crowds gathered from a dozen liberated worlds. His words carried into history. "They feared us because they thought we would never change. They were right. We have not changed. We still fight, we still bleed, we still save. And now we will do it together." The roar of voices, human, Orwani, Illyrian, and more, rose to the skies. The galaxy had a new order. The Council's tyranny was ash. In its place stood a Senate of the free, forged in blood, sacrifice, and defiance. The Sol system, once caged, now shared, shone as a beacon of mercy and strength. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. It had joined it, and in doing so, changed it forever.